Yeah, that's
Nice seeing you.
so basically. Right. Okay. Welcome back, and welcome back also to our colleagues who are online. And I see some new faces. So I see Paul. So hello, Paul. Good afternoon to you. Conchita, thank you for staying on. I know it's, what is it now? It must be 1:47 a.m., I think, based on the time difference from yesterday.
Yes.
So really appreciate you still with us. Okay, so thank everyone, for coming back, but also for the very, at least in my group, and I know sorry, not my group, in the group I was in, and I'm sure that applies to the other groups, that there were some very good, engaging conversations on the 3 questions that were posed to us. So, Linda, no, it's not okay. You were going to do something.
Sorry.
But somebody else can get that for you. Yeah, all good. So I think at this stage, do I just hand over to you, Linda? Do I, for the order of next steps? Thank you.
Thank you so much, Alan. Yes, thank you. So what we're going to do today, first of all, thank you so much for the very good conversation that we had in the breakout sessions. This is going to help us move forward and figure out how IESBA and I believe IAASB is going to look at private equity investment in accounting firms and determine, what can we contribute to this issue. So the way we're going to do a report back is, as you know, there were 3 different questions. There was 1 specific question to each group, and then the 2 general questions. So I'm going to ask each of the note takers if they will report back on the specific questions, and then I'll wrap up with the general comments at the end. So Cam, if you would, will you share with us the comments from group 1 and the question?
Thank you, Linda. So group one's specific question was, how can firms align their public interest responsibility with the private equity investment's primary objective to maximize profit for investors? So a couple key themes, but firstly, an observation from the group, and that was that the question appeared to be biased. It's not always about maximizing profit. It's really about competitive returns. So firstly, we should start from the baseline that not all PE firms or investments are bad, quote unquote. Some want sustainable competitive returns, which also seems to align with the previous finding in our presentation before lunch, that the average hold time was 5.7 years. So it's not a short hold time. So there is a sustainable competitive return that is wanted. From this group, in order to align the firm's public interest responsibility with the private equity investment, the main thing that the firm needed to understand from the private equity investor was why, first of all, why the private equity investor is investing in the audit firm. What is the private equities firm's strategy to get a competitive return? And thirdly, what is their exit strategy after that 5.7 years? Who is it going to be flipped to? How are they going to reap their returns, essentially? Another observation was that at a baseline, we have to recognize that private equity firms understand what they're investing in. And part of a DNA of an audit firm is maintaining quality and ethics. So if a private equity firm doesn't recognize that this is what a firm does, then this is a problem. And furthermore, if it lets this aspect of the audit firm slide in terms of quality and ethics, then the competitive return for that private equity firm will also be lost. It was also noted that on the flip side, however, with private equity investment backing audit firms, there might be a mindset shift within the partners of the firm. Because right now, currently all audit partners, they invest in their firms. The risk is on them when they sign off on the audit report, but the financial benefits also come back to them as well. So it's a very delicate balance. Once they have PE firm backing and money comes from the PE firm, they might also shift into a mindset of having a larger appetite for higher profit, higher risk engagements. There's also an observation that when you have PE money backing it, there is this intangible control that also happens. So ultimately, in order to achieve this public interest responsibility, there needs to be a balancing of all these risks that have been identified. So when the private equity investment comes in at the forefront, you need to agree the decision makers, you need to agree the structure of the transaction, and the partners within the firm need to also have the veto rights on the board. It was also observed that ideally, the investment managers should not be the ones deciding the quality management decisions of the firms. They should, better be passive investors and let the management of the audit firm continue their operations. It was also observed that this is really still an unknown, and firms and regulators need to continue to monitor this and be agile in their responses going forward. So this was for the specific question from Group 1.
Thank you very much, Cam. I think from Group 2, John, please.
Okay, thanks, Linda. So our question actually had 2 parts, so I'll break it down into 2 parts and respond to those separately. So the first part of the question was, how might private equity investment in accounting firms affect quality management at the firm and engagement level? So initially there were some responses where there could actually be a positive impact on quality management. So there might be more efficiency in processes, could promote growth and innovation, and also around the potential recruitment of talent with that additional injection of capital, etc. And all of those could potentially lead to or impact on a positive side of things on the firm's performance. However, in saying that, there was also a lot of threats to quality management that were discussed. So some of them were around automation, or the focus on automation, outsourcing and cross-selling, that this could have a fairly serious impact on quality management. Concerns around that auditors may no longer be exposed to liability and reputational risk, again, potentially impacting quality management, and also around there being a high risk of conflicts of interest. Some of the other concerns related to the sort of the short to medium term investment with private equity, and this might not align to ongoing there's cost intensive requirements and tools to enhance quality management, so that short to medium term investment may not align to that. And again, it might take away focus from investment in quality, and again, that relates to sort of the culture of driving down costs, and that might impact the ability to mitigate that. Also around acquisition pace, and if that's too fast in terms of the onboarding and maintaining quality, and that could lead to inconsistency and potential negative impact on audit quality. The responses also talked about possible guardrails that could be put in place to mitigate those threats that I've just mentioned. So one of those was around separation between the assurance and advisory side, so as to avoid conflicts of interest and the onflow of that onto quality management. Importance of having system and quality management across all lines of the business. The segregation of auditors and leadership and management could impact or assist with as a guardrail. And also around whether there's an oversight body that has been involved in the transaction, in terms of, there was a UK FRC example provided in relation to that as well. Another thing that could impact quality management, and this sort of relates to what Cam was just mentioning, that it may be dependent on the exit strategies, and these may not be known, so the exit strategy of the private equity firm. So, for example, the private equity investment, they may be there to stay long term, so there may not be a short-term focus. Obviously the audit firm is profitable, but the major growth is in the consulting side. So if the focus is on the consulting side, that could be problematic. Around the short-term profit, that there is sometimes that focus because there is the perception that the consulting side might be undervalued. And there also might be private equity firms that come in after the initial private equity firm to purchase as the firm grows. So the second part of our question was, is it possible in practice to address the risks posed by private equity investment in accounting firms with respect to the fundamental ethical principles and also on independence? So some of the issues that were raised with independence becomes more of a challenge to manage when there's private equity involved, as not only need to look downstream, but there's also the requirement to look up in relation to the ownership structure. But potentially with the private equities where some of them are smaller in size at this point in time than the smaller firms that they're investing in, that the conflicts may be lesser. However, with the larger private equity and the larger firms, there's a greater risk of conflicts of interest and independence risks. The private equity firms might not have a very good understanding of the independence rules around where if you do purchase an audit firm and the requirements underneath in terms of the portfolio companies and the independence requirements that relate to those. There was discussion around firm culture and governance and around the importance of having non-executive directors, operational separation, and also that transparency. That if there's already a bad culture within a firm, that bringing in private equity investment is not going to fix the issue. It might actually exacerbate the issues. There was also discussion around the legal form of the transaction versus the substance. That they could construct a transaction so as to meet the rules or avoid, issues with rules, but the substance may still be a problem from an independence, but also culture and governance perspective. Some of the views were that it is possible to address or in practice the risks to the fundamental principles in independence. So there's a few things that were raised here that it might be possible with the right investment in quality management and independence processes, and also if there's the appropriate culture and tone at the top. And the private equity firms might actually have the right motivations, and if it is done the right way, it's just that you need to ensure that you protect where things could go wrong and ensure that there are controls in place to protect those particular scenarios. Another view was that private equities, that they don't have an interest in doing things the wrong way, so it's not in their best interest to do things the wrong way. They may have an interest in reducing costs, but longer term, it's in their interest to do things in the appropriate way. External monitoring and open dialogue can also help to address the risks. And also things like non-audit service caps could also help to reduce risks as well. So that was a summary of responses to our 2 questions.
Thanks so much, John. I think last we have Joanna for question 3, please.
Yes, so the breakout group 3 has responded on the question, how might private equity investment impact the ethical culture of accounting firms, and how might firms manage such impact and ensure that the search for profit objective does not override their need to abide by strong ethics principles, independent practices, and the public interest. So there are mixed views from different participants. They are some being more positive or open to the private equity investments. For example, providing capital to invest into technologies development and getting and retaining talents in respect to the human capital. On the other hand, some participants seem more cautious, seeing the profit maximization, like potential impact on the independence and conflict interest. Some jurisdictions may have witnessed increased frequency or severity of failures, for example, on audit planning or audit quality and ethical behavior. Reputational risk has been also underlined. But globally, the participants agreed that the time will tell, and it's quite early to have a definitive answer. Awareness and monitoring the situation of the PE investment has been emphasized too. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Joanna. Okay, so here we are with the general questions. And there were a couple that were discussed among the groups. The first one is, what impact might PE investment in firms have on the accounting practice market? So all three groups discussed this, and we've compiled kind of the key themes. One would be that PE investment may introduce risks that were not previously encountered by accounting firms. Therefore, it would be important for the accounting firms to identify these risks before moving forward with PE investment to determine how best to manage or mitigate the risk. There's interest in the typical PEI structure, and this is something that was discussed in our group. It seems that all employees are going to be housed under the LLC, the organization that the PE funding is going into. And there will be a service agreement that sets out how the employees are going to be shared with the audit function. So this is quite intriguing, and it could result in unintended consequences if not properly considered when the structure is being negotiated. And that's one thing that really I think we heard in the conversations is how important it is at the very beginning for the structure to be properly negotiated to ensure that there is that grounding of public interest mindset and to ensure that the public interest is at the forefront. Accounting firms need to be grounded in the public interest mindset, and that needs to be adopted by the PE firms that invest. Essentially, there should be alignment of the key principles, and public interest should play into those principles. And you may recall that David Madden, when he did his presentation this morning, he talked about the consolidation of those smaller firms. And as this happens, there could also be concentration of risk that occurs, but there would also be economies of scale that are enjoyed. So that would hopefully increase efficiency and profitability. So you kind of have the pros and the cons there. These economies of scale could be good because they would allow the PE firm, they could address the risk among the portfolio companies and deal with those all at one time to increase that efficiency, the profitability. Moving on, PE investment will have greater influence on technological investments. And as we've seen a lot, that is, I think, a very compelling feature of PE investment in firms is the potential for those firms to improve their technology, which would hopefully then improve the efficiency, attract more talent into the profession. So that's quite important. It was noted that firms will be more focused on their own margins with potential PE investment on the horizon. So they would want to either possibly not be a PE target, or alternatively, they might be interested in being a PE target. So they would be focusing on that. And these points, either way, might distract from their objective, the objective of the accounting firm to provide high quality services. There could be conflicts of interest risk, and these would certainly need to be mitigated. There could be a move towards audit-only firms due to ownership requirements and the separate consulting service lines. PE, private equities could shift the firms auditing the public interest entity and top size firms. Those were the comments we had on question 2. On question 3, which is really more focused on the standard setting bodies, what should the IESBA and the IAASB be concerned about as standard setters beyond the matters that were already discussed in the previous questions? So the comments we received, standard setters and regulators both play a role with respect to private equity investment in accounting firms. Standard setters may be able to be more responsive initially with educational guidance to assist the profession as they navigate the PEI trend. Some members felt that the code is sufficient for dealing with this situation. At this point, IESBA and the IAASB should do horizon scanning to identify matters that should be shared with the market as they travel along this journey. It's important to note that PE investment is more focused on SMPs. So we want to ensure that we're viewing this through a wide lens. Oftentimes, there's discussion that's focused on the capital markets, the larger firms, but this is almost more of a small to medium-sized practice issue. So we want to make sure we view this through that lens as we move forward. Can PE ownership be reconciled under ISQM1? So does that structure fit within the risk and objectives requirement under that framework? And then kind of we talked about the role that standard setters could play with respect to educational guidance. So kind of speaking to that point, there are a few bullet points that I want to share. So just really kind of helping firms be aware of various issues like competition for resources. You know, as PE firms invest in accounting firms, what's that going to look like for the talent acquisition? You know, is there going to be more competition for resources, or will there be more people coming into the accounting profession, which could be a good thing. There should be public statements of PE firms about automation and other resources. We need to be clear about our remit to protect the public interest, and whether it's from private equity investment firms or anything else. There was a belief that for now, the standard setters should really focus on, you know, just scanning the horizon to see what is evolving, not rushing into something while the earth is still kind of shaky. So just wait and see, and along the line, make sure there is proper information going out to the professional accountants or to the accounting firms. It's imperative to emphasize some key principles on the public interest. It's also imperative to make sure that PE firms understand the language and the requirements of this profession. So we might need a more direct interface rather than just translation via auditors and assurance providers. Again, stating, you know, the SSBs need to educate on where things are going, could potentially go wrong, like in independence. I know with respect to PE investment, independence is a major concern. So standard setters really need to think about, okay, let's figure out what could go wrong there. And then the last comment is the need to be setting standards at all levels within the firm leadership, auditors, other service lines, and staff. So that completes our report back on the comments from the different breakout sessions. And Ellen, I'll turn it back over to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Linda, and also Anna, Joanna, and Cam for sort of the work you've done in giving the feedback. So I think I really just want to turn to you to see whether you feel there's any need to have any sort of comments back from the SAC on what members from what they've heard. I mean, obviously, I'm conscious of time. So we'll have to, if we do that, we'll have to sort of keep it very focused and tight. Or whether you feel you've, you know, in the rooms, the breakouts, you've had enough engagement, you need time to digest and distill what you've heard and reflect on that for your next steps. So what would you prefer? Yes.
Well, Alan, I prefer to leave it to you to decide. I think that we heard a lot of comments, some of them not unexpected, others a little bit more different from what we had already heard. Of course, this will be very, very good food for thought regarding what we are going to do or consider do or not do in the near future. Though everything is open, but if we still have time and if there is any comment that any member
so that's what I would suggest. So let's just see. I'll just look around the table and see if anyone would like to, you know, add anything to what hasn't been said rather than rediscuss what has been said. So anything that has popped into your mind as a result of listening to the feedback that may be sort of helpful to state or express? I'm just looking on the screen in front of me to see if any hands are going up. I mean, you probably had enough of this. You're so tired anyway. It's late into the day, and the last thing you want is another discussion on this. So I understand that. So I don't see any hands going up there. Anybody in the room would like to add anything? Including, please, observers or others who sort of have a deep interest in this. If you have anything to add, you don't have to. There's no requirement to add anything. I don't see any any desperate needs to. So no, in that case, let's finish here and just say again, thank you for setting it up in the way you've done it. I think the breakout groups worked quite well, and I know we tried that last time, and obviously we'll bear that in mind going forward to see how best we could utilize this format to have more deeper discussions on specific topics. So thank you for that. Right, so I guess it stays with me. I think we've had a very, busy time together, and again, I'd like to sort of recognize the colleagues who couldn't make it to New York, but of course have been with us throughout. What I would like to do now is to invite Robert Cannon, who is the PIOB observer, just to share remarks from his own observation of the meeting, including anything you would like to sort of inform us from the PIOB in relation to the projects and work streams that the two standard setting boards have been working on and discussed with you. So, Robert, over to you, please.
Thank you, Alan, and thank you everyone, both online and in the room, for your participation in the meeting. The first thing for me to say is, having observed both this meeting and also the first meeting 6 months ago, was that I was able to report back to the PIOB, having appointed you, that the first meeting was highly successful, and that the very challenging process which our nominating committee went through to find a wide range of participants for this group, from not only geographical diversity but also different stakeholder backgrounds and gender diversity as well, seems to have been paid off very well and been very successful. So we were the chair of the nominating committee, Liz Morel, was very pleased to get that feedback. It was not an easy process appointing you, especially as it was all done off the papers rather than with interviews, which is what happens with the standard setting board members. So that was very good, and I wanted just to provide that feedback to you. And I thought that the first meeting, with the level of commitment that was shown by all of you to continue in a very proactive and interactive way, was very encouraging. And so from building on that, it's been great to be able to attend and listen to your deliberations over the past 2 days. It's been a shame that not all of you have been able to be here, but can I say to those who are online, including people like Conchita, who I know very well from experience coming from New Zealand about being in the middle of the night for long meetings, thank you very much for your engagement, all of you, and for your contributions and your willingness to contribute. And I think also thanks to Alan, because again, I know from experience that chairing these hybrid meetings is not easy, and so you've managed the in the room and the virtual dimension extremely well, Alan. So that's been very good. So I think there's some good continuity there, and I was very pleased with the more strategic focus of the agenda this time. I think Alan's point that was made right at the outset of the meeting, that it was very helpful to have a more granular agenda for the first meeting, was useful in order to get to get people engaged with the subject matter, particularly those of you who aren't involved with audit and ethics in the audit and assurance and accounting professions as part of your day job. So that was helpful last time, but I think that we've now been able to, particularly with the discussion that's happened today, I think have been able to take things to a higher level. So that's from my observation. I think that's been successful. And I thought it was also very helpful yesterday to have the opening session looking at the feedback that you had provided to the standard setting boards, feedback session from them in terms of the strategic work plans, where they're at. I'm very conscious of the wish that was expressed last time that this group is fully engaged in the process of the implementation and then the development of the next lot of strategic work plans. And I'm sure there's a good foundation has been laid for that to continue to happen. So I thought that was a very good session. Just a couple of observations about topics from yesterday. There was quite a lot of discussion in that first session about post-implementation reviews on projects. And this is something that the POB places a high emphasis on because it's obviously important with a standard like, for example, the NOCLAR standard, which is it's some time now since that was deliberated on and approved by the IESBA, but it's had a long lead-in time, and the adoption issue jurisdictionally has been very challenging for a lot of the reasons that were mentioned yesterday, including legislative frameworks in other countries. And so it is very important to encourage this review process to be undertaken in relation to the standards, and that's often figures in POB discussions when we're talking about an issue and where there may be some disagreement between the POB and the standard setting board as to what's the right sort of emphasis in terms of concluding a project. Well, let's put it into practice. Let's see what happens, and let's come back and review it again after an appropriate period of time. So I think it is important to not to lose sight of that. And for something like the NOCLAR standard, I think the right time for the post-implementation review is certainly something that requires careful thought. And I know that Gabriella and the board are giving careful thought to what's the appropriate time for that. But the need is there, as recognised in the SWP. So I just wanted to comment on that. I also just wanted to have a quick word about the PI issue. And this has been very recently debated by the POB with Tom and Gabriella at our last meeting in Madrid. And so where the IAASB has got to with those two options has been driven very clearly by a concern that the IAASB has about ensuring consistent application of the ISA suite of ISA standards globally, and it's recognised that it's not in the public interest to have differential application of the ISAs. And because of the necessary interpretation of the IESBA PI definition, which lands in a position where a jurisdiction that has not adopted the PI definition means that there is effectively no PI, that then creates a gap in terms of the application of the standards. And so that explains why the IAASB has reached the point of saying, well, we will just hold fire on on bringing the full suite of PI entities under the IESBA definition into the ISAs at this point. Now that has been a contentious decision Tom, by the in terms of the PIOB's understanding of how that would play out. But what we've said in our latest public interest issues update, which is available on our website just in the last 2 days, is that position is respected, and that what is important is that the IAASB explain the position and make it clear what its understanding of the public interest is in this respect. And I thought, Tom, you did explain that very well yesterday, so thank you for that. So that is going to be it's going to be an ongoing issue as we move forward. I think from my own perspective, as also having been the chair of a national standard setter that does, in New Zealand, we adopt the wide PI definition and have for many years. I think the focus for both standard setting boards has to be on encouraging uptake of the PI definition across jurisdictions. And I think whatever is done, that's the ultimate public interest. And so the steps that need to be taken over the next the coming years need to be focused on that, so that that gap that's there now and looks as if it's going to continue for some time between the ICES and the IESBA, the broad scope of the IESBA definition is able to be closed. So again, a post-implementation review at some point in the future, but probably quite some time in the future, will be helpful and should focus on the success of the efforts to promote global adoption of the IESBA definition. So I hope that I've spoken at a little bit length on that, Alan, but I hope that that's helpful to inform the SAC and do continue to raise. Bring information and helpful observations from your jurisdictions on that as we move forward. Technology, it was a very good discussion yesterday, building on the discussion at the first meeting, and I've had good feedback from the IAASB staff. Jasper buttonholed me just before and said he found it was a very helpful session, and I did as well. And the PIOB is very supportive of all of the work that's been done on technology by both boards. We were very supportive of the IESBA technology enhancements to the code, which were completed a couple of years ago now, but are now just taking effect now. And we've also been very strongly supportive, not only of the development of the technology position by the IAASB, but also of the decision to expand the scope of the audit evidence project out to include the broader internal control environment. So we're very encouraging of that, and I think that's been reinforced by the discussion yesterday. So that, I think, is very helpful to everyone. Thank you very much for that. And the observation that I've already passed on to Billy and the IAASB staff has been that when you've got the building blocks in place for how these revised standards are going to look, then do bring them back to this group, because I think that will enable more focused discussion. And I think the SAC is showing already that the benefit of some continuity, and that as things crystallize and become more focused, then that'll be an opportunity for you as well to provide more focused input as we go. So thank you for that. And an extremely helpful set of discussions today on the IESBA projects, the future of the profession. There's a real challenge in understanding how the structural issues around firms, how they're structured and how they are governed, and what other responses might be necessary, such as education and training that was mentioned this morning, can influence ethical behaviour by individuals, and not only influence that changes in behaviour, but also be seen to do so. So we've been very supportive of the initiative on this as well. We've been urging a systematic approach to it by the IESBA, and I think the IESBA the board has responded very well on that. So what our public interest statement just released says is that we're encouraging an outcome of an ethical culture that is integrated in the firm's strategy, covering all service lines with supporting performance indicators, measurement and monitoring, which can then guide a systematic approach to continuous improvement. So it's a bit of a mouthful to read out, but it's there on the page, and I think you know what I mean. But within the context of that, I think the two or perhaps three significant points that were made from within the discussion this morning are very important. The first was Natasha's elephant in the room comment about the financial incentives in the structure, and I think that was echoed by other comments around the table as well. And the comment that the current business model is not fit for purpose. That's very important, as is the viewpoint from the profession, which came from Susan and others, about the importance of understanding the impact on the future of the profession, which of course is in the public interest. We all agree on that. And the Nicole's point, I think, as well, was a very important point about the importance of understanding the interplay between governance, leadership, and promotion of an ethical culture, and getting that right in the thinking, the underlying thinking. That's your academic perspective, which is helpful to us all. Nicole, I think, was also very, very helpful. So what this really shows is the importance for the IESBA of being clear as it goes along about understanding what's the problem that is being addressed, and how much, importantly, how much the IESBA is able to address and resolve within its mandate. And Natasha, I think in response to your point, one of the things that we've been saying at the PIOB is the IESBA can't resolve all the problems, can't resolve the problems of the the commercial model of provision of audit services and other services. That's a matter for the profession and for regulators to resolve. But what the IESBA can do is, through its work, can influence how those broader issues, that elephant in the room, as you put it, Natasha, can be addressed. So we're continuing to think very carefully about that. We engage with Gabriella about it at each of our meetings, and we'll continue to have the discussion. But again, I just think this reinforces the point, and the discussion about private equity in the last couple of hours has again reinforced the point that the value of having this multi-stakeholder group here, that you can continue to provide those left field comments and provide the challenge, as well as contributing more generally. So I thought that was great, and so thank you very much for that. And Alan, just as a concluding point, I think I just want to again acknowledge the difficulty which a number of members of this group have as a self-funding group in travelling long distances for the meeting once every 6 months. It's just a 2-day meeting, so the value proposition for the travel is difficult for many people. And I guess what I would just encourage again is is to think of the value of this group as not just coming to the meetings, but also being able to contribute between meetings and over time. But then when you do have the meetings, I think it's important to make sure that there's a good value proposition in taking the time to come, so that you can have some takeaways as well as just giving on it. And I am aware that the next meeting is going to be scheduled again alongside the National Standard Setters meeting. And the same issue arises for the National Standard Setter group in terms of the value proposition of coming all the way to New York for a 2-day meeting. So I would just encourage the staff and the board leaders just to think about perhaps how the synergies of those 2 meetings could enhance the value proposition for both groups through mutual observance and the like. I'll just leave that with you. So, Alan, I hope those comments have been helpful. And once again, thank you very much for the opportunity to both to attend and to just make these observation remarks, and just to reinforce that the oversight board is very welcoming of the contribution that this group can make.
Thank you, Robert. A very comprehensive summary, which we appreciate. And yes, I want to just pick up on the last point you make about the value proposition of coming here. I mean, you come from a long way, many also too. And what we, for me, we give our own input to you, but I think the ability for us to get to know each other, to share our own different perspectives is enriching. And I continuously learn by just listening to each viewpoint. It may be different slightly to mine, that doesn't matter, but it triggers something in my mind which, I hadn't thought about that, or I get, okay, I need to think more about that, and that's an important point, and how wrong I was on my own views, etc. And I think that's good for all of us. So, one of the things we did want to set out when the group was put together, I mean, I wasn't obviously part of those decisions, was to make sure that as much as we can, and we accept that from time to time there will be people who cannot, for reasons which occur often at short notice, can't be here in person, but obviously the richness, not only to the meeting, the feedback, but also that we get from being here is I think important. So as much as we can, we should try to be here in person, notwithstanding, as you say, the burden, the time it takes, often, of course, the cost as well. But I hope that, and we will go to a closed session, so obviously I'd welcome sort of feedback on that from colleagues. But it was predicated on physical presence to get the best value both ways. And I certainly feel that, notwithstanding our colleagues who couldn't make it, they have actually been part of this conversation. They've contributed very well. They've enriched the conversation by taking part, even though they're not physically in the room. And I think the technology has worked very well. So, that just shows that the hybrid system, however challenging it might be to manage, it can work. And that facility we'll always make available for those that clearly, for good reasons, cannot be here. But obviously, I would like to encourage us to try to be here as much as we can, because I mean, I will leave here feeling much enriched by the opportunity and the presence. So thank you for that, and I do thank, obviously, Robert, on behalf of the PIOB for the support you continue to give, not only, of course, the standard setting boards, but also the SAC. And I do agree with you. The nomination committee has put together a great group of people, very diverse, but contributing very strongly. So thank you for that. Obviously, I'd like to thank the SAC members for your participation, both yesterday and today. But I also would like to make one other point, which is, and I've said this to both standard setting board teams, that we should not lose the opportunity of contributing in between meetings. So I've encouraged the staff to reach out to us individually where you think we might have knowledge, expertise to contribute to your thinking. I mean, obviously, this is more formal when we get together, but please do use us as much as you feel you can. And I'm sure all of us will feel that when called upon for a short conversation or input into subjects. I know, Doug, you continuously have been, corresponding with the SSBs on matters of importance, and I would encourage the SSBs to do the same, to do reach out, not obviously manage in a way that is practical, but obviously, we're a resource at your disposal. We're here to serve the public interest, which means here to support you in your work. So please, feel free, and I'm sure my colleagues would nod and say, yes, I'm willing to respond as and when called upon. So, please, I wouldn't say abuse us, but do use us. I hope that the papers were clear and were circulated in plenty of time, but again, if that's not the case, give us some feedback. So all I can say for now is to, no, before I conclude, I'd like to check with Gabrielle and Tom. Do you want to make any closing remarks? I might see it first.
Conscious of time, I'll be really brief, but first of all, just want to echo my thanks to everyone for your contributions, your willingness to serve. Alan, for your leadership here, to the staff teams who put this session together. And I think it's been a really useful session. I've taken a few things. I'll give you sort of my quick takeaways from the sessions in terms of the discussion about the strategy and work plan and what we're doing on our work program. I think there was this sense that it does make this focus, this pivot towards technology that also will provide a little bit of strategic focus to the board's projects, but at the same time, a little bit of a time to absorb all the other existing standards that have come out seems appropriate. We did take from the technology session this concept of providing guardrails and defining what guardrails is in such a way that still maintains principle base, keeps the focus of trust at the heart of what we're doing, and it does not inhibit innovation as a necessity going forward. The last discussion, it mainly focused on things touching the ethics board, but I am taking away for the conversation is that we should be certainly sensitive to the interconnections between some of the ethical dimensions and the quality management impacts, and be sensitive to that. And what we're clearly in regular conversations with IESBA, but I remain aware of that. The other thing I took from it is, in the range of activities that we could do is be careful about who does what and how in the process. And there may be some different tools in our toolbox to do it, but it also may be someone else's job to do some of the work. So, I'll kind of ruminate on the impact to the IAASB in that regard. So thank you very much. And always in between meetings, feel free to reach out to us too. Don't wait till we call on you, because we certainly will respond if you have ideas or activities that we should participate in too. So thank you.
Thank you, Alan. It would take me probably a few hours to summarize all the takeaways that I'm taking back with me from this meeting. A lot to process, a lot of food for thought, and a lot to process over the next weeks and months and times. Thank you very much for that, because we need to be provoked all the time. If there is something that I really appreciate is that people take me out of my comfort zone. I don't have one actually, but sometimes it's necessary to be a little bit shaken and to be shown other avenues and other perspectives. So completely excited and enthusiastic about what we got from this group, just like in the first meeting. Now, I'm not going to go into any details about what we heard here. We got, a message which was clear on the one hand of support to this kind of new strategic approach of IESBA to address new topics, new areas, new perspectives, and new ways of working. Also a message of, if I may say so, of caution, not to boil the ocean, not to do everything at the same time, not to think that we can change the world, and that we are completely aware there is no magic wand at IESBA. We just try to provide the maximum contribution that we can for what we believe it's the value of this board. And in that perspective and in that respect, I would probably call for this group to keep on helping and supporting the IESBA doing what it has to do, which is to keep ethics high in the agenda. The profession has many times, it came clear in this discussion that the profession is like in a juncture here. It's not only us who have to make strategical decisions, but also the profession, choosing how to move forward and how to take forward this unique role and responsibility that the profession has to be a gatekeeper, to be a change driver in the best sense. And for that, and that is no question for me, for that, ethics is, if not the most important tool, it's at least among the most important tools and instruments and flags that the profession has to wave to move in that direction. So this, of course, takes the support of our stakeholders, and the support is also shown this way by your availability, your generosity of your time and of your reflection. The quality of the interventions that we got here show how much you were attentively looking at the documents, the presentations, listening to the discussion, and this is of enormous richness for us. So I'll stop here by thanking you. And of course, just like Tom, we are always available. We are already abusing some of you in between meetings, not abusing, but using. But we will do more intensively also because these discussions and these conversations allow us to understand that beyond these meetings, we can get some additional value from the members of this group. So thank you very much and safe travels back home.
Thank you, Tom. Thank you, Gabriela. So just to confirm, the next meeting will be on May 5th and 6th, or 5th and 6th of May, for those who don't use the American way of saying it, in New York. I would encourage the team to really get the hotel block bookings done as soon as possible, because the sooner we do it, the cheaper it'll become, and also that applies to flights as well. We will endeavour to ensure that the agenda and the papers are circulated in advance. We will actually write out to you just to see, what topics would you like us to be included. We did that for this time round. You may not have seen it reflected fully, but that's just because of the time constraints. But it doesn't mean that we're not going to think about those for future agendas. So it's never a waste of time to ask for your input ahead of every meeting. This meeting is live streamed. You may not realize that, but we've been sort of live streamed for the last 2 days. So there must be some people out there who've been following it either fully or partially. So I'd like to thank them for that. We don't know who you are, or we can't see on the screen, which is probably an advantage for you. You can see us, but we can't see you. But anyway, thank you if you have been participating. And, we look forward to your participation sort of in the virtual world at our next meeting. So I also would like to wish everyone a safe journey home, and of course, have a wonderful end of the year. I was going to say Happy Christmas, but we have to also recognize that not everybody celebrates Christmas. So have sort of happy festivities around the world, and hope you have a great start to 2025, and look forward to seeing you in May. So this concludes the public session. So I guess something happens where people who are out there just get cut off. I don't know what happens, but I'll leave it to the team to